when me and my wife met, I was like, travel's a waste of money. Like you can't, if I'm traveling, I'm not working, I'm not earning any money. That was how bad and toxic my mindset was then.
Yeah.
And she basically coaxed me into traveling over time. And then I just loved it. And now, like I said, like with all my goals were like based on my career, right? Like other than the end goal of being a great dad, which is kind of like a slow burn. Like you're not gonna, no one's gonna give you a medal overnight and stuff like that, right? It's just something that you find out. It's intangible, but you find it over time. So because my personal stuff's ticked off, I'm now looking out for, all right, how do we fulfill Michelle's goals? How do we fulfill Max's goals? Like, what do I need to do to tick off their bucket list or whatever? And Michelle loves to travel. And so every time we go away, it's just, all right, where do you want to go? And literally, when we did that 5-month trip traveling through Europe, I didn't know where we were going the next day. It was, to me, every day was a surprise, and it was awesome. Whereas Michelle is very meticulously planned every single day. She's got a spreadsheet going and all that sort of stuff. I think, part of it probably is like, because the way I am, I guess it kind of works in well with Michelle. And that's, it's really awesome that we met and she's been like great with me. Like it was pretty funny. Like in the early years, instead of me just opening up, I would just try and break up with it. Like I'd be like, I'm probably not good for you in the long term. Like you probably just need to go and find someone else. Like that was how bad I was, and like now looking back, you think about that and go, man, like how did I not realize that I should go see someone? How did I not realize that there's something seriously wrong with me? But our strength is communication. Like we communicate quite well. Part of it was, like I said, Michelle used to work in the States, so we had a long distance relationship for about a year, and I came and visited twice a year. But the rest of the time, we'd just be, emailing or on Skype back then. And it forced us, when you're not physically present, because it's easier when you're physically present to just sit on the couch and watch a movie. But when you're not physically in the same room, all you've got is just talking, right? Which is fantastic. Because like we've kept that still. That was 11 years ago. We communicate every single day and quite well. So I think the travel thing, the adventure thing is now not so much me running away, but me realizing that, it's such a big open world out there. And I'd love my kids to have perspective.
Both she and I and me and my dad are really good at staying in our own lanes in the law firm. So we run on EOS, and I don't have any opinion on anything in the HR, quadrant, right? And so I just let her make all of those decisions, and because of that, there's really no conflict about, well, I think we should do this policy, and she thinks we should do. Like I don't really care, and she doesn't really care about any of the operations of the auto accident section. So it's been good. And really the best part for us has been that it now frees us up because we're physically in the same place all day. And so like if we want to go have lunch and we don't have to hire a babysitter to come in at night, we don't have to travel to each other for lunch together. And for us, like we had a really hard time when all the kids were young, and you can't have any serious conversations until after they're in bed, 7:30. And then you're mentally exhausted because you've gone to work and you've raised kids all day. And so it's freed us up to have good, intentional, deliberate conversations at a point where we both kind of have the mental stability and the framework to do it. I think the reality is like we went through a couple of hard years of raising very young kids and not communicating very well. And we've gotten much better in the last 2 years about pausing, letting the moment and the anger subside, and then like an hour or the next morning, an hour later or the next morning, saying, hey, this is what I think happened, like from my perception, and here's what I didn't like about it, and here's what I'd like for you to do differently next time. So I have a coach. My coach is basically a therapist. But we've individually gotten a whole lot better at processing what's going on with us and then communicating that to the other person. But we don't have any great system that I can share with your listeners or any framework. That's Sunday night conversation. So we tried for a while to do, Sunday night after the kids go to bed, have a conversation, but we were just so mentally exhausted that that if either one of us were kind of having a down day, it either didn't happen or it didn't happen very well. Now that all the kids are school aged and we are finding more time to, after they all get out the door to school, or like I said, at lunch at the office, to have those deliberate conversations and to not have to be the one that wins all the time, right? Like, fine, whatever, just go do that, and to not care when the other one says fine, whatever. Like, what's important to you doesn't have to be important to me, and vice versa.
Men and women are not equal.
Yeah.
There are things that I do much better than my wife, and most things that she does better than I do.
Yeah.
But that's what makes you a good team, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with me being different than my wife, or my wife being different than me, and I would hope that we would be, so that we can complement each other. My wife is very eloquent when it comes to telling me where I'm screwing up. I'm sure you probably is too. And more than once, she told me that what I was doing wasn't the most intelligent thing for the health and well-being of our family. And of course, those words were not easy. I got her point, and so I was going to try and scale back a bit. I was going to try to not work on the weekends. As I was escaping the military, if I'm always missing it, my wife would be pretty vocal about the fact that my priorities are probably screwed up. She's always been on the end where family is number one priority no matter what. In fact, she works primarily to assist the family in whatever it is that she's seen deemed valuable, which is, spending time together and traveling and going and seeing the world, and those kind of things is what she primarily works for. So it's easy for her to say you're spending your time in the wrong area when most of her funds are going to traveling or funding certain things like house renovations or new appliances, et cetera, and most of my funds are going to paying the mortgage and the electrical bill and the food. So it's a different perspective when it comes to what am I working for. I don't think she's ever worked, at least since we've been married, to fully support our family. She's always been the one that has been at home and supported our kids and taught our kids and raised our kids for the most part when I'm not home. She has been the rock that our family has needed when I'm not there. And so my perspective is always I've got to make enough money and to be able to support our family, and hers is always I've got to be home enough to support our family.
Mm-hmm.
It's a completely different way of looking at life, right? And that comes back again to we're not equal. We're completely different, and we should be. But yeah, the mechanism there is when I am failing and it becomes a trend, she will call me out, and when she's failing and it's becoming a trend, I will call her out. And our kids are the exact same way. So it's pretty evident when you're a close-knit family when somebody is not going the way they should. You got to listen to your partner, and you got to listen to the criticism that they're giving you, because honestly, they're just trying to help, and they're usually communicating with you in the way that you present yourself to them, that they think that you're going to take it in the most effective way. What is the value of money if you end up losing your family in the end? And that's really kind of what it goes down to, is how much time and effort, if I'm already comfortable, if I've already got enough money to support my family and live in a comfortable way, what is the point of working an additional 60 hours every week if I lose my family in the end, the whole thing that I'm trying to provide for in the beginning?
Yeah.
And that is something that has been a huge slap in my face in the past couple of years is, yeah, I'm doing all this for you. I'm doing all of this to make your life even better than it was before, but you never see me, and inevitably we may not see each other anymore if I continue.
So my wife and I, we have the most valuable. So I'd say EOS has been valuable for our business, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've implemented an EOS family thing too, where my wife and I
about doing something like that. Anyway, sorry.
It's so great. Yeah. So we implemented a level 10 meeting in our own household. Nice. Where my wife and I meet. And this was, so, obviously the struggles my daughter's been through, she hasn't been involved in that. We haven't forced our son to be involved in it, but we may start to include them in a secondary meeting of that nature too. But in that meeting, it's been so valuable because we've been able to hold ourselves accountable to these kinds of things. We've been able to set the tasks, set the goals, and use the very same, I think, ways that I add value within Hill Brothers to add value in the home, which sounds very cold and callous when it comes out of my mouth, but it's actually, it works because it makes it so that, those things get on the schedule and it just doesn't get squeezed by other stuff. Yeah. When it's on a to-do list, when we're talking through this and we're saying, all right, my to-dos for this week are, play volleyball 3 or 4 times with Sarah, or, do this with Zachary, or what have you. Then I can, showing up the next week and say, I didn't do that because of Hill Brothers stuff. Wow, man, I look like a jerk. So there's an accountability piece there. And I think that kind of thing helps to put that in place. But yeah, that's level 10 meeting has been invaluable for us.
I think the relationship between the spouses is important. It's paramount. I mean, first God, then spouses, and then children. And don't use your children as an excuse not to do something. I can't leave New York because I'd be taking them from their friends. In fact, in reality is I need to leave New York because I need to cut the boundaries and I need to start over with my wife. We'll be happy. The relationship will be okay. And then the kids will benefit from that long term. I think we're afraid of short-term pain for long-term gain. I mean, the short-term pain is real, but that does lead to long-term gain. I think we have to focus on that as well. The happy wife, happy life is probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, I used to believe that 20 years ago, but you can't make your spouse happy. You have to make yourself happy. And then for making yourself happy, it's not your job to make him or her happy. But if you're happy in your life and you're content, that will rub off and that'll bleed into the relationship. That'll make it happy. So I think you have to preclude that. You really have to take care of yourself, enjoy yourself, and love yourself. But I never felt a lack of love in my life. So I never felt disdain for myself either. So I never even thought of that, putting myself above my wife. I just put that relationship right up below God and the kids below it. But if that's the way that person feels, more power to them. They have to take care of themselves. Once they take care of themselves, they can come fully present. They can come fully engaged. Then they can go out and they can find somebody to love. I think that works for them. I think I can honestly say that my wife probably saved my soul, because early on I was more into the materialistic. I was more into making the money and less into, I wouldn't say family, but that was my focus. I was focused on just supporting and providing for the family. And, she kept telling me, God's going to provide. Don't worry about it. She had a different outlook on money that I did. And as the years grew, I just made her understand my outlook on money, and she started adopting, well, what's financial freedom? Well, financial freedom is doing what you want, when you want. You want your mom to come down? I can fly her down. Oh, you want to have somebody come over and do a sabbatical for a month? Well, I can get them an Airbnb. It's not going to kill me. So I think being open and trying to explain your side, I think for us men, we're always trying to solve and trying to fix. That's not the name of the game. The name of the game is to be able to listen. I think that's the problem. And once I went to life coaching school, that's when it really helped me out as far as relationships, because all of a sudden I became a better listener. I became more in tune with my feelings and understanding what was going on with me. But even early on, my wife trusted me with a lot of things, trusted me with the work, trusted me with our investments, trusted me with when I decided to leave the restaurant. And I had massive trust for her. When she wanted to have a baby at home, I'm like, you want to have a home birth? What is that? I don't even know what and the pressure from the family to like, you're crazy. And that's been my whole life, because I've homeschooled, home birth, real estate, that's all foreign to most people. And the pressure, we had a podcast with Brad Lee, and he used the word allodoxophobia. Never heard of what that word was. You know what that is? Because I was asking him, how do you build a brand? And allodoxophobia is the fear of other people's opinions. And if you go through life and you're always worried about what other people think, it's going to be challenging. But if you have a spouse that you believe in and that you trust, it'll make those decisions a lot easier. When we started homeschooling, no one was homeschooling. I was the weird guy. I had the restaurant. I had public school teachers coming in and asking me, well, where does your kid go to school? And I'm like, I homeschool. And they looked at me like I was nuts. And same thing. I had construction people would come in. They're all, where do your kids go to school? So they thought I was the weird guy. And that was really challenging, really tough. But I knew that my wife really believed in it. She did a great job. She excelled at it. So that's where I think part of the relationship comes in. You need to trust that person. But at the same time, my wife is giving me the trust that I'm going to invest our money and that I'm going to go into real estate. So I worked really hard to get into multifamily. I was in mentorship groups. I'd be working 45 to 50 hours a week at the restaurant, another 20 hours on multifamily. So you need to show that you're living up to your end of the bargain by saying, I want to do this. You have to put in the effort and put in the work. My wife, when she had the home births, super healthy. She was really in shape. She really knew what she had to do. She picked out some really great midwives. She owned it. So that's why I felt comfortable. Okay, it's your decision. I go by the decision. I see all the work and all the effort you're putting to it, and I see how important it is to you. So how can I say no to that? I mean, that's not really fair. It's something that you really believe in, that you really worked hard. And it's the same thing with her and the real estate. You're not letting me buy this 25 unit with Jake. You've seen how much work and how much effort I've put into it. She trusted me. And that first deal, obviously led to a lot of other deals. I think trust and putting hard work and showing that you're really committed to what you're saying you're going to do is really important in the relationship.
When you have a 3-year-old kid and they fall out of the boat, you're like, push your wife out of the way to get that 3-year-old kid, right?
Exactly.
But that's not the way it works, and without the marriage. And really, like, we're in that place now where that's so important because the kids are not the glue anymore. A lot of my friends are getting divorced, right? The kids have left the house and they don't even know each other anymore. And they're like, oh, I want a young girlfriend. I want that romance back that I had. And I'm like, dude, that's not a marriage, Yeah. And by the way, it's going to be the same exact thing within 6 months. Yeah. Like, trust me, like I've seen it happen. And that's why they end up with third and fourth marriages and all that stuff. Yeah. So praise God that we have stayed together. And, she had my wife had a really great mom, but her dad wasn't in the picture. He was an alcoholic. He left them when she was young. And so she didn't have a dad figure, right? So so we both were trying to, we call it breaking the chain in our church, right? Like we were trying to change the reality of what, because a lot of people don't, we talked about that, right? A lot of people just follow it. And so that's been a great journey, but I can't tell you how much, it really truly saved my life, like having faith and a true faith. We're not paying our mortgage this month. Like, I could see that causing a lack of sleep. I know that it really affected my wife, like way more than me. Like I always felt like we were going to be fine because I've gotten out of so many things before, right? I think, being an athlete, doing that, running a business that, I went through 9/11, we had a huge dip. 2002, we had a huge dip. Like I got all that. I never knew. Problem with 08 was it was so much longer than anything else. Yeah. Like lines of credit did not last. I used to just get a $50,000 line of credit because I knew in 6 months interest rates would be back. Everything would be fine. That didn't happen to us. For us, it was almost 5 years. Like it was really protracted. But looking back on it, like, I think it's good for us now because my wife knows, hey, we got through that so we can get through anything.
I think a lot of businesses and a lot of marriages fail because, there's a lot of reasons, but I think one of the reasons is because we feel this shame and we feel like we can't share those failures, those feelings of failure. They're not failures, but those feelings of failure and those struggles that we're going through, we feel like we can't share them with anybody else because it's too shameful. And what ends up happening, I used to tell this to high school kids all the time, like when you don't share that stuff and you don't let other people speak into that, what happens is you stay inside yourself. And when you stay inside yourself, it becomes this downward spiral, right? Yeah. And that is where you fall apart, your business falls apart, your relationship falls apart. You've got to find somebody that you can trust that can speak into that and can help you work through that stuff and can help you problem solve, both tactically, like when it comes to business and relationship, but also just emotionally, because both of those things are super emotionally charged. And, I've found that when super strong emotions get involved one way or another, you start making worse and worse decisions. And it's just this downward spiral. So like when those difficult times come, find somebody. It can be like a counselor, or it can be a consultant, or it can be a friend, or it can be a friend of a friend. Just somebody that you can trust a third party that can speak into that business, that can speak into that relationship, that can speak into your life. And they don't necessarily have to have answers for you, but just by allowing somebody else sort of into that, it interrupts this like downward spiral that we can go in. When we live in our heads, things tend to go down. When we get stuff out and we allow other people into it, that's when healing happens. That's when growth happens. And that's where you can sort of break that downward spiral and start to approach problems and issues a little more effectively, I found. I think early on, the emotions were just high, right? And so conversations just spiraled quickly. It would be, either one of us getting fired up or one of us shutting down. Those were sort of the options until sort of both of us just shut down at one point, and we just were not communicating very well. And I think one of the strengths of our relationship is that we're actually really good communicators, especially during difficult times. I think a lot of that has to do with us going through the difficult times and having to figure out how to communicate during those difficult times. Thankfully, I've got a lot of flaws, and I'm a bonehead in a lot of ways, but I'm not like an explosively angry person, and neither is my wife, generally speaking. So we didn't have that to work through and to deal with. But again, like emotions were high. There's a lot of stress in the situation, right? And so, I think one of the things, obviously one of the things that we learned is, find somebody trusted. I wouldn't say we had a super great counselor. I mean, he was great. He was a good person and all that. I don't think it was super effective, but what it did do was just open some lines of communication with us a little bit and forced us to interact. And when you're talking in front of people, look, just face it. Like you want to put on the best front possible, right? Yeah. And so emotions stay a little bit lower. Not always the case, but they did for us. And so we were able to just open those lines of community, get the foot in the door, right? Like just crack it a little bit. And then what turned out, like we ended up, because of it was like, I'm dealing with all this stuff. And she's like, I can't handle any of this. Don't talk to me about any of it if you can at all avoid it. A couple of things that I think help that is, number one, just developing empathy. And I think empathy gets this like bad rap, but I actually think it's a superpower, to be honest. And if you can be an empathetic person, I think a lot of times it gets associated with like a feminine trait. But actually I think it's I think it's a superpower. I think it's a huge strength. Because if you can empathize with somebody and sort of understand how they're feeling and make them feel like you understand them to an extent, that really opens a lot of doors for communication and to strengthen the relationship, right? So, part of it was just developing this empathy for my wife and like the feelings that she had about the situation that we were going through and the stress she was feeling, and her developing empathy for me and like realizing some of the things that I was going. To this day, she doesn't know all of the stories because she just doesn't want to hear them. But realizing like, okay, like you're going through a lot, both on the financial side with the businesses, but also just with some of the stuff that happens in that laundromat for whatever reason. Developing that empathy, but then also empathizing with the fact that, on my side, like she needs to be shielded from this stuff. Like she cannot deal with it and just not capable right now to deal with it. So I need to stop, communicating that and empathize with her on that, but also, find ways to hear the things that she is thinking about and going through. And for a while I couldn't, she would express frustrations about the finances or whatever. And I would just be like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, I don't have any more money. There's, and like, that's like a conversation killer, right? Right. And so empathizing with like, I've got to find ways to allow her to express herself and her feelings. And then her sort of empathizing with me, like, I need to process stuff verbally. And for me, I'm trying to shield her from that. But when it does come out, like her, developing this empathy for me and just like, okay, he just needs to get this out. And, and trying for her, I think what she was doing was trying to put up a partition between her feelings and the things that I was saying when it did leak out of me. And so anyways, I think empathy is like this superpower. I'm a huge fan of that. I think that we should be proactively developing empathy. And I think that if and when we do that, it will benefit all areas of our lives,
For sure.
Relationally. So I think that's a big key there.
I attribute to my wife, because many times, like, when I'm having like a pretty heated conversation with my son, she just basically just being an observer, and then everything is done. I mean, she's the one that usually tell me, like, providing a feedback. And that's part of the involvement too. It's like, the many times I'm providing feedback to her, and then she's also providing feedback to me. We help each other to grow as a parent and as a husband and wife, like how we need to grow eventually, balancing each other up. So the whole family as a unit can grow together. And in some cases, she's also the one that providing a feedback to my son when the time is right, like, hey, this is what you're trying to say, or me, sharing it to my sons, like, hey, this is what your mom meant to be, she didn't mean any harm. So I think becoming like there's also going to be another rear view mirror, just not going to be like one way.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a culture that it could be one way, especially in the Asian culture. It could be like parent ways the right way, but I need to learn, like, we need to evolve and grow also. Our parenting style and parenting approach. I'm learning, the last few years, like, a feedback is a gift, something that I have to reflect on it and grow from it. So, it could be tough to take it because you feel like, hey, this is the way I was brought up. This is the only way I know how to do it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I need to see it, the positive thing out of this, and seeing for the long range, this is what is the intention, right? The intention is not going to be harming me, just more like making the family get together even closer.
Yeah.
And with that kind of mindset, then by default, it just evolves and then becoming more recurring. I think creating a rule of engagement is also pretty crucial, right? So for us, like, even during our, when the beginning of when we got married and toward the end of our dating relationship, though, we started creating a rule of engagement. Like, number one, we settle up, we have a disagreement or conflict, we finish it up, and that's it. This is the end of the chapter. We're not going to even open it up. This is the closed book, pretty much. We've seen that so many couples that basically, when they open up a disagreement, argument, they just opening up all the past history, like the things that happened like many years ago, or even last week, thing like that. I think we becoming, we've seen enough that we figured out, like, rule of engagement, like, hey, when we have an argument, once we settle, this is the end of it. We're not going to bring it up again. I think that's pretty crucial for us, because otherwise we're going to bring it up to all, like, hey, your mom did this, your parent did this, my parent did this, and so forth. Like, hey, no, this is just us, right? We settle it down once we're all done, move on.
My wife and I, I think it's 3 years. This will be year 4. We started doing. We take the weekend and we do this workbook. It's a couples retreat where we talk about all of our goals and our values and plan out our year, and then we do a quarterly and a mid-year reevaluation of it. It's through The One Thing. Have you heard Gary Keller's The One Thing?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, so through there, we were doing that couples retreat. Man, it's been a game changer for us. Like, I keep it at home. I even had to call my wife out last week because we're working on this girls soccer organization. I'm really fully into it, and she kind of fell off the last month and a half, and because she wasn't happy with the coach, and she gets into these she doesn't like someone, it's like, oh, shuts off. And I had to remind her, like, baby, we sat here and agreed we're going here, legacy, this stuff, way over here. This is just a human in the middle of it. We cannot allow a human in the middle of this. Any stop with me and you have decided that we're going here that's bigger that no one else can even see. No one else has any idea what our long-term, what legacy, what we're trying to leave here and why we're trying to make this impact on these girls and what we're doing. Right. And I need you to be there. Because if you're not with me, then I'm by myself and now I'm alone.
Yeah.
And now, that's a trigger for me when I feel lonely. Like I start getting upset and I don't want to feel lonely in my house.
It was a time of a lot of learning. One, learning about communication, learning about the grieving process, learning about support. When there's an 83% chance families will separate when there's a death of a child. And one of the doctors told us that before we even left the hospital, before our daughter was even. So that tells me two things. One, there's a really small chance you can stay together, but there's a chance, right? The odds are against you. But man, if you are one of those people that say, you know what, I like those odds because somebody's making it. Let's figure out what they're doing. So I had to learn a couple things. One was communication. We obviously, men and women, communicate vastly different. And I had to quickly figure out that sometimes not saying anything, not having the answer, not being able to fix the problem, as most guys want to do, is okay in this scenario. Some of the best remembrances I have of us grieving together is me just arm around my wife, weeping together because there's no words that you can say. And for guys, it's kind of weird that we think, well, I got to say something. I want to provide something, very philosophical that can fix this problem, but it can't. So sometimes just sitting in silence does the trick. Another thing that we had to really work through is the grieving process. And I like, I tell people, my wife and I both got to experience our daughter for 86 days on earth. But for my wife, she had her in her belly for 9 months. That is a much longer relationship, a much harder thing to grieve. And my wife and I talk about losing, a child that's 22 years old or 30 years old. It's the longer you spend with them, obviously, the more attached you become. But my wife was very, very grieved where I had 86 days. All 86 days were spent in the hospital. In a very isolated environment and very sterile. But the way I would grieve is I would take my surfboard or my stand-up paddleboard far out in the water. And out there, I would get angry. I would shed tears. I would beat the water and yell at God and try to figure out why this happened. And I would come home and I would be okay. My wife would be home with our 2-year-old son grieving. I would be over it for the day and she would be in the thick of it. So she couldn't see me grieving. And so for a while, it was a very hard thing to communicate because she never saw me grieve. So she thought I was okay with it or I was over it and I had moved on. Where in reality, we were just grieving two different ways. And so when it was a struggle to communicate that until I realized she just wanted to hear that I was having a tough day, or I thought about Brooklyn, or something reminded me of her, or I saw a girl, a 5-year-old girl that, man, that could have been our daughter, whatever. But the key was telling my wife, hey, this is what I'm dealing with today, instead of just thinking, I'm just going to keep it, submerged and not, I'll wait till it gets over. And so that was a big lesson for me. And then the third thing was just being patient, knowing that every Christmas day, we celebrate birth of Jesus and the birth of our daughter. And those are two joyous occasions, but one, obviously the birth of our daughter and then losing her later is very bittersweet. But she may grieve our daughter until I'm dead.
Yeah.
That may be a reality, and that's okay with me now. I always thought it was something that you eventually just get over. In reality, you never truly lose that memory. You never truly lose that experience, no matter how old your child or that person you lose may be. So just, it was a lot of me not trying to fix the communication, the grieving, or the timing of it. And in that, we've learned a lot about each other and the way we both work. And I think that's made our marriage so much stronger than it was 8 years ago. I was blessed to have a lot of things work into my marriage, and probably too long to get into right now, but I realized that God's hand was on my life and the life of my future spouse. And I know that because when I was in third grade, my wife came to the same school that I was in Oklahoma through her mother getting divorced and moving out of state away from the situation. But her mother didn't have the financial ability to keep her in school. It was a private Christian school. Didn't have the finances to keep her into school. Well, that year, the school board was running a pilot program to sponsor a family to allow them to go to school for free. The board was tied and torn between, they had two spots, giving those two spots to two different families with two different kids, or one family with two kids. Well, my wife has a sister, and they were both about to get yanked out of school because of tuition. The senior board member was the tie-breaking vote that determined if my now wife got that scholarship or got that sponsorship. And the senior member voted, I think it should be this family with two small girls.
Wow.
16 years later, I introduced my spouse, my fiance, to my dad, and my dad was weeping. And he told us this whole story, and he said, when I was in third grade and my wife was going to school there, that he was the senior member of the board that picked that family should get the scholarship.
Wow.
So you take something like that, a story like that, and you say, holy cow, God is in that. I can never let that thing go.
Yeah.
There's so much value there. I mean, but that story aside, my brother asked me one time, hey, how did you find your wife? Like, she's amazing. I want to find a girl just like you. And I asked him, where are you looking? And at the time, he was, newly out of college. He was living in LA, and he was in the party scene. And he's like, well, I'm always at the clubs, and I'm all, at bars, and I'm always finding girls and bringing them back home. And I was like, if you want a girl like the wife that I have, you're not going to find her there.
Yeah.
So first of all, it's important to figure out where you're going to look, right? Where is that pool of people that you're going to choose from? If it's at a church, like it was for me, don't look in the club.
Yeah.
If it's at the club, don't look in the church. Right? Second, iron sharpens iron. People grow stronger and better together when there's that ability to grind things out, but also be very similar.
Yeah.
If you are, for me, I dated a girl that was Catholic and I was Christian, and my faith is very important to me. But I told my mom, I think we'll work it out. She's like,
it's close enough.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's close. It's close. It's close enough. My mom was spot on. It wouldn't have worked out.
Yeah.
And go after what you want. And somebody once told me, write down all the things that you want in a spouse and trust God that he'll provide. And there's big debates over is there one person or is there a collection of people? Like, I don't want to get into that argument, but I'm going to say that I wrote down those things on my list, and every one of them were met. Every one of them. And it wasn't a super long, 72 item list. It was, 10 or 12 items, but 100%. And so that opportunity came when I got so frustrated with what I was trying to find and who I was trying to figure out was the right one. And I said, I'm done. I'd gotten cheated on. I was in flight school. I said, I'm done. God, I don't want to do this anymore. You're going to have to provide somebody.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, I met my now wife of 15 years. So a lot of rambling in there, but I think the biggest one is, where are you looking and what do you want? Because if you start to give up on those things that you truly want, that you think will truly make you happy, then that's changing the course of potentially your future.